I used to think the safest time to be out was right before sunrise. Nobody's really awake yet. The bars are closed, the kids are still asleep, and even the usual weirdos seem to be home by then. That was the logic my friend Derek and I used on the morning this happened, and honestly, it sounded reasonable at the time. Derek and I had been doing these early morning walks for about a month. Nothing intense. We were both trying to get a little more active, and since neither of us was morning people, we figured if we went before work, we would actually stick with it. We lived in the same part of town, a pretty normal suburban area on the edge of a bigger city. Lots of townhomes, a few apartment complexes, a little shopping strip with a gym, a coffee shop, and a gas station that was somehow always open no matter what. Our route usually started at my apartment, cut through the back lot behind the shopping center, crossed a service road, and then followed a paved trail that ran alongside a drainage canal and looped back toward my place. It was a decent walk, maybe 3 miles total, and because it was a public trail with streetlights and security cameras near the businesses, we figured it was fine. The morning it happened was one of those weird, still dark summer mornings, where the air already felt warm and sticky even though the sun wasn't up yet. Derek showed up in shorts and a thin hoodie, holding an iced coffee he had clearly been drinking too fast. He looked at me and said, "I swear, if I see one more raccoon on this route, I'm quitting exercise." I laughed and said, "You act like raccoons are the problem and not the fact that you look miserable every time we do this." That was pretty much the mood. We were tired, joking around, just trying to get the walk over with. The first part of the route was normal. We crossed behind the grocery store, past the dumpsters, and cut through the little fenced service path that connected to the trail. There were no cars around except a few parked ones near the gym. Everything felt quiet in that sleepy, early morning way. About 10 minutes in, I noticed something behind us. At first, it was just the sound of another pair of footsteps on the trail, not super close, but enough that I heard them over Derek talking about some dumb argument he had with his girlfriend the night before. I glanced back and saw a man maybe 30 yards behind us. He was wearing dark, athletic clothes, like he was out for a run too. Baseball cap pulled low, hands loose at his sides, steady pace. Nothing about him really stood out, except that he was the only other person out there. I told Derek, "There's a guy behind us." Derek looked back once and shrugged, probably just walking the same way. That made sense. The trail was public, and people did use it in the mornings, so we kept going. But after another minute, I noticed something that made me uneasy. He wasn't gaining on us, and he wasn't falling back either. He stayed at the same distance. When Derek and I sped up a little, the guy sped up. When we slowed down to step around a puddle, so did he. It was subtle, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unnotice it. I looked over at Derek again. He had turned quiet. "You seeing this?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Yeah, I've been seeing it." We both looked back again. The man was still there, still moving at the exact same pace as us, like he was following some invisible rule. Derek muttered, "Maybe he's on the same route. Then why does he keep matching us?" He didn't have an answer. The trail curved around the canal and dipped under a bridge where the lights were dead except for one flickering fixture near the far end. That section always gave me the creeps, but that morning it felt worse than usual because the guy behind us was still there. It was hard not to keep checking over my shoulder. Once we got under the bridge, Derek said, "Let's just get to the strip mall parking lot and cut across. More people around there." I agreed. It sounded better than staying on the trail. So we picked up the pace. Not a full sprint, just enough to make it obvious we were moving faster. The man sped up too. That was the moment it stopped feeling like a coincidence. Derek looked at me and said, "Nope, no, that is not normal." We came out from under the bridge onto the section of trail that ran behind a row of office buildings. The road was nearby now, and we could see the glow of traffic lights at the intersection up ahead. I remember thinking that once we reached the road, we'd be fine. There'd be cars, people, probably a cop driving by, real-world stuff. But before we got there, I heard something behind us. Not footsteps this time. A whistle. Just one long, low whistle. Derek turned around first, and I did too. The man behind us had stopped. He was maybe 20 feet back now, standing still in the middle of the trail. His head was tilted slightly, like he was studying us. Then he lifted one hand and waved. Not a friendly wave, more like a slow, deliberate, "Come here," Derek said under his breath. "What the hell?" The guy didn't answer. He just kept standing there. I felt this cold rush in my stomach, that instant feeling that something had gone completely wrong. I grabbed Derek's arm and said, "Keep walking." We did, fast. We got to the end of the trail and cut across the lot behind the coffee shop, heading toward the main road. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting him to follow, but when I looked back, he was gone. That should have been a relief. It wasn't, because as we reached the sidewalk by the road, I saw him again. He was across the street, standing near the corner by the gas station, still in the same dark clothes and cap. There was no way he should have gotten there that fast. The route didn't allow for it unless he had cut through the parking lot or crossed somewhere we hadn't seen. But the thing that really messed with me was that he wasn't even pretending anymore. He was just staring right at us. Derek grabbed his phone and whispered, "I'm calling 911. The second he said that, the man stepped backward out of sight behind the gas station wall. We crossed the street immediately, practically jogging now, and by the time we got to the sidewalk in front of the gym, Derek had already told the dispatcher what was happening. We stayed in the light, right by the entrance doors, while he talked to them and kept looking around like he expected the guy to jump out of a bush. A minute or two later, a sedan pulled into the lot behind us, then another. One of them was an unmarked police car. 2 officers got out and asked us to describe the man. We did as best we could. Dark hoodie, cap, average build, maybe late 20s or 30s. One of the officers nodded like he already knew what we were talking about. That's when he told us they'd had multiple complaints about a man matching that description in the area over the past few weeks. He had been seen watching people on the trail, lingering near the apartments, and once following a woman to her car behind the pharmacy. Nobody had been able to get a clear enough look at him to identify him, and he usually disappeared before police arrived. They searched the area for about 20 minutes, but never found him. The officer told us to stop using the trail in the dark, at least for a while, and gave us a few basic safety tips like they were trying not to freak us out more than we already were. Derek and I never walked that route again before sunrise. Actually, we stopped walking there completely. A few days later, one of the neighbors in my building mentioned that some guy had been caught on a camera near the shopping center, standing outside the closed coffee shop at around 5 a.m., just watching people come and go from the trail. I still think about that whistle sometimes, the way he waved, the way he was already somewhere else when he should not have been. It was the kind of thing that seems small in the moment, until you realize how close you were to being alone with somebody who clearly had no business following you. When I was 22, I lived in a small apartment on the edge of a suburban town outside St. Louis. It was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted quiet, but still wanted a target within 10 minutes. Most evenings were boring in the best way. You had families grilling in their backyards, kids riding bikes until dark, dogs barking at nothing, and that weird peaceful feeling you only get in neighborhoods where everybody pretends not to know each other too well. I had picked up jogging a few months earlier, because I was trying to stop feeling like a zombie after work. I worked inventory at a home improvement store, which was basically 8 hours of lifting boxes, answering the same questions, and listening to older guys complain about their wives and back pain. Jogging helped clear my head. Most nights I would put on my headphones, loop through the neighborhood, and come back sweaty, tired, and a little less angry at the world. One of my routes cut behind a subdivision, past a retention pond, and a long maintenance path that bordered a patch of woods. It was still technically part of the town, but once you got near that trail, it felt isolated. No sidewalks, no streetlights for a good stretch, and only a few scattered houses set back behind tall fences. It was one of those places where you tell yourself you are being dramatic, but your brain still keeps scanning the dark. When I was 22, I lived in a small apartment on the edge of a suburban town outside St. Louis. It was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted quiet, but still wanted a target within 10 minutes. Most evenings were boring in the best way. You had families grilling in their backyards, kids riding bikes until dark, dogs barking at nothing, and that weird peaceful feeling you only get in neighborhoods where everybody pretends not to know each other too well. I had picked up jogging a few months earlier because I was trying to stop feeling like a zombie after work. I worked inventory at a home improvement store, which was basically 8 hours of lifting boxes, answering the same questions, and listening to older guys complain about their wives and back pain. Jogging helped clear my head. Most nights I would put on my headphones, loop through the neighborhood, and come back sweaty, tired, and a little less angry at the world. One of my routes cut behind a subdivision, past a retention pond and a long maintenance path that bordered a patch of woods. It was still technically part of the town, but once you got near that trail, it felt isolated. No sidewalks, no streetlights for a good stretch, and only a few scattered houses set back behind tall fences. It was one of those places where you tell yourself you are being dramatic, but your brain still keeps scanning the dark. I should mention I was not a speed demon. I was decent enough, but I was more of a long-distance, steady-pace guy. The kind of runner who could go a while, not the kind who could outrun trouble if trouble decided to sprint after me. That fact becomes important later, because before that night, I always thought being fit was the same thing as being safe. It was late October, around 8:30 p.m., already cold enough that my breath showed in the air. The sky still had a little gray-blue light left in it, but darkness was settling fast. I remember I almost skipped my run because I was tired and it had started sprinkling earlier. But I hated breaking routines, so I grabbed my jacket, set out with my phone clipped to my waistband, and started jogging. The neighborhood was normal at first. A couple porch lights, a TV glowing through blinds, someone laughing inside a garage. Then I turned onto the maintenance path, and everything got quieter. The road noise disappeared. The houses thinned out. The only sounds were my shoes hitting the asphalt and the steady crunch of gravel when I crossed the little service entrance near the woods. About 10 minutes in, I noticed a motionless sedan parked along the curb near the tree line. It was a dark gray 4-door, older model, nothing special. At first, I didn't think much of it. People parked there sometimes to walk dogs or smoke or talk on the phone. But as I got closer, I saw there was no one in the driver's seat, and the engine wasn't running. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it did the opposite. Empty cars on quiet roads always seem to mean something is wrong, even when you cannot explain why. I kept jogging. That was when I saw the man. He was standing on the edge of the woods, just far enough back that I almost missed him. He was maybe in his 40s, average height, wearing a dark hoodie under a tan work jacket and jeans. The weird thing was that he was not doing anything. He wasn't walking, he wasn't on his phone, he wasn't looking around like he was lost. He was just standing there, half in the shadow of the trees, staring directly at me. I gave that automatic little nod people do when they pass strangers outside, like, hey, I see you, you see me, we're both civilized. He did not nod back, did not smile, did not move. I told myself he was probably just some guy taking a smoke break or waiting for a ride. Still, I sped up a little. A few seconds later, I heard a sound behind me. Not footsteps at first. A whistle. 3 sharp notes, low and slow, like somebody trying to call a dog. I knew, with that instant sick certainty your body sometimes gets before your brain catches up, that it was meant for me. I looked over my shoulder. The man was no longer at the tree line. He was walking onto the path. Not running, not rushing, just walking straight toward me with one hand in his jacket pocket and the other hanging loose at his side. I turned back around and immediately started jogging faster. My playlist was still going, but I could barely hear it over my own pulse. I remember thinking, just keep moving. Just get to the lit street. Just do not panic. Then I heard the whistle again. Closer this time. I looked back and saw him with his hood up now, head tilted slightly, like he was watching me choose what to do next. He still wasn't running. That somehow made it worse. People who do not have to rush because they know exactly where you are headed are a special kind of terrifying. I cut off the path and went through a side street between two houses, thinking maybe I could lose him among the fences and parked cars. My lungs were already burning, and I had to keep telling myself not to act scared, because I had this stupid idea that if he saw me run too hard, it would encourage him, like fear itself could provoke him. That turned out to be the dumbest thought I have ever had. I got about halfway down the street when I heard a car door slam behind me. I looked back and saw the gray sedan from the curb. It was now pulling away from the woods and rolling slowly after me with its headlights off. That was the moment I really started to freak out. The man was in the driver's seat. I do not know how I missed him getting into the car. I do not know if there had been someone else inside or if he had moved that fast while I was not looking. I just know that now there was a car creeping toward me in complete silence, and the same man was behind the wheel, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting by the window. I started sprinting. Not jogging. Sprinting like my life had just been handed to me in pieces. I took off across someone's front yard, slipped in wet grass, almost ate it, then cut between two houses toward a brighter street where I could see headlights and the red blink of a stop sign. My chest was on fire. My throat felt raw. I could hear the sedan behind me, still moving. Not fast, just patient. That was what made it so horrifying. He was not trying to catch me quickly. He was trying to make me panic. I reached the corner and nearly collided with a woman unloading groceries from her SUV. I must have looked insane because she froze and stared at me like I had fallen out of the sky. I shouted something like, "Call 911," and pointed behind me without even stopping. The gray sedan had turned onto the street and was now rolling past the intersection. The driver looked straight at us. Then he smiled. Not a big smile, just a tiny, calm one, like he had already won something. The woman finally saw the car and started yelling too. She dropped one of her grocery bags right there in the driveway. The sedan paused for maybe 2 seconds, and then the driver made a slow U-turn and headed back the way he came, vanishing toward the darker streets near the woods. The police came pretty quickly after that. They drove around for a while, found the car abandoned near a service road, and later told me it had stolen plates. They never found the man. I gave my statement. The woman gave hers. A few days later, an officer called to say they had found an old backpack in the trunk with zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and a pair of work gloves. They asked if I had seen any weapon. I told them no, but I remembered the whistle. The officer went quiet for a second after that and said they had gotten a similar call about a jogger in another neighborhood 2 weeks earlier. Same general area, same description, same whistle. That part stuck with me the most. Because I was not random. He had done this before. I stopped jogging alone after that for months. Even now, years later, I still do not run that maintenance path. I do not care how nice the weather is, or how normal the neighborhood looks. Every now and then, when I am out running somewhere else and hear a whistle behind me, my whole body locks up for a split second. And every time, I think about how close I came to learning what was in that car. I still think about that summer every time I lace up my running shoes. For context, I live in a pretty normal suburban area outside Columbus, Ohio. It is one of those neighborhoods where every street looks the same, kids ride their bikes in the road like nothing bad has ever happened in the world, and the biggest excitement most days is a delivery truck showing up on the wrong block. There is a greenway trail that runs behind the neighborhood and cuts through a line of trees, then comes back out near a church and a strip mall. It is the kind of place people go to jog, walk dogs, or push strollers while pretending they are getting some fresh air and not just trying to survive another boring Tuesday. That trail was basically my routine. I work early shifts, so I started running around sunrise, usually with one earbud in and one earbud out so I could hear traffic. I am not a marathon guy or anything. I just like the quiet before the neighborhood wakes up. It is one of the only times of day when everything feels peaceful enough to think. The first weird thing happened on a Tuesday in late May. I was about a mile into my run, coming up on the part of the trail that crosses a side road. A white Toyota Highlander was parked in the little pull-off near the entrance, just sitting there with the engine on. That alone was not unusual. People stopped there all the time to check their phones or wait for somebody. What was odd was that the driver was watching me, not in a dramatic movie way, just sitting still with both hands on the wheel, head turned toward the trail like he was waiting for me to do something. I glanced over, and he looked away immediately. He was a white guy, maybe late 30s, with a baseball cap pulled low and mirrored sunglasses on even though the sun had barely come up. I kept running. About 2 minutes later, I passed the little neighborhood exit and saw the same Highlander behind me on the road, moving at a crawl, not speeding, not being aggressive, just following at the exact pace of my jog. At first I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was heading to work and happened to be going the same direction. I made a turn onto a different street to test it, and the SUV turned with me. That was when I felt my stomach drop. I cut across a small side street and took another turn toward the elementary school. The SUV did the same thing, still slow, still staying back. No horn, no rush, just following. I ended my run early and went home by a different route. I did not tell anyone, because honestly, I did not want to sound paranoid, and I definitely did not want my family telling me I could not run alone anymore. I figured maybe I had overreacted. Then it happened again. Same man, same white SUV, same habit of staying a few cars back like he was trying not to make it obvious. This time it was a Thursday morning, and I was running the opposite direction around the neighborhood streets instead of the trail. I saw him twice that day. Once near the gas station at the corner, and again near the park entrance. The second time, he was parked so the front of his SUV faced the street, like he had been waiting for me to come by. I remember looking at him through the windshield and seeing him smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was small and thin, like he knew something I did not. I started changing my route every morning after that. I ran earlier, then later. Then I mixed in streets I never usually used. Every time I thought I had broken the pattern, that SUV would appear again within a day or two. Some mornings it would just idle behind me for a block, then disappear when I turned. Other times it would be parked in a driveway with no one around, engine running, like it was trying to blend in. I even started noticing little details I should not have been able to remember if I was just imagining things. A cracked passenger side mirror, a hanging air freshener shaped like a pine tree, a dent near the rear bumper. And the worst part was that there was never a clear enough moment to call the police. He never got out, he never yelled, he never did anything technically illegal in front of me. Just watched, followed, waited. For almost 2 weeks I kept my mouth shut. Then one Friday morning, everything got much worse. I had taken the trail again because I thought a busier route would be safer. There were a few dog walkers out, one woman with earbuds, and a guy in a reflective vest trimming weeds near the fence line. I felt normal enough to relax. When I reached the far end of the trail, I saw the white Highlander parked across from the entrance. This time there was someone in the passenger seat. I only caught a glimpse, but it was enough to make me stop thinking and start reacting. The passenger was hunched low, almost curled toward the floorboard, like they did not want to be seen. The driver was still the same man with the cap and sunglasses. He was staring right at me. Then he rolled forward slowly, as if he meant to block my path. I turned around and jogged back the way I came, but not at a normal pace anymore. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I kept looking over my shoulder, and sure enough, the SUV was moving again. Not fast, just steady. By the time I reached the small wooden bridge near the creek, I was running hard. There is a steep little access road beside that bridge that connects to the neighborhood behind the trail. I took it because I figured if I got into the neighborhood, I would be around houses and people. When I hit the top of the hill, I looked back. The SUV had pulled onto the access road behind me. This was the first time I saw the driver do more than just follow. He opened his door. I do not remember deciding to sprint. I just did it. I cut across somebody's front yard, nearly ate it on the grass, and heard the man yell something behind me. Not a scream, not a threat. Just loud enough to carry. "Hey, come back here." I did not. I kept going, and in the middle of the next block, I saw an older woman watering flowers on her porch. I yelled at her that someone was following me, which sounded insane even as I said it, but she dropped her hose immediately and started shouting toward the street. The SUV slowed, then kept going. The driver did not stop. He did not even look at her. He just drove off. I called my dad from her porch with shaking hands. He picked me up 15 minutes later, and when I tried to explain it, I sounded ridiculous. A man in an SUV had followed me for 2 weeks. He had been parked on roads I used to run. He had smiled at me. He had gotten out when I ran. My dad took me seriously, though. He drove me to the police station that afternoon. They wrote a report, asked for the make and model, and told me they would keep an eye out. But without a plate number or a better description, there was not much else they could do. A few days later, my neighbor mentioned that someone had tried to open car doors in the area early in the morning around the same time I had been running. Another person said a white SUV had been seen creeping through the neighborhood by the trail. Nobody could prove it was the same guy. I could not prove it either. But I know what I saw. I know how it felt to be watched from inside my own neighborhood, with nothing between me and the street but a pair of running shoes and a sunrise that suddenly did not feel safe anymore. I still jog sometimes, but I do it on a treadmill now, in a gym with mirrors and cameras and other people around. I do not use the trail anymore. And every once in a while, when I am driving home early in the morning and past that same trail entrance, I catch myself looking for a white SUV with a dented bumper and a missing hubcap. I have never seen it again. At least, not up close.